Good afternoon. It's Coach Dylan and I here again. Unfortunately, we keep doing this every week. And we're gonna talk about sprinting and just conditioning in general, as to how it applies to field sports specifically and what we can learn from probably the track realm, and also what we see as a detrimental in our own kind of athletic uh, fields. So go ahead, Chief. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think just from a talking standpoint, topic-wise, what we can get into is not only what should people and teams be doing when they're all together, maybe when they get out of this, but also what should players, athletes be doing now, and what should coaches be telling their players and stuff to do now. Just kind of how to approach the whole situation we're in, and then give people a better understanding of what to do when we get back to some normality.
Well, so one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is like, we put this premium on speed, right? In that everybody, if you ever talk to any coach or any dad or any mom about their kids, like, well, he's really fast, right? And that typically puts them in a category of probably one of the better players on the field. And that's, every coach you ever talk to is like, I'm looking for really fast kids. Like, so
No one wants to turn that kid down.
no, right? And even if they stink at the skills, like as long as they're super fast, they're going to try to find a spot for them because it can be utilized. But when we listen to now where most of the people in the high level that are teaching speed, I think we have it a little bit kind of backwards in that we believe conditioning is the same thing. So we just kind of live in these realms of like, all right, I want to get really tired. I want to be huffing and puffing and feel my heart racing. But ultimately, that's like not actually carrying over into what we think we could probably like yield from our training or want to yield from our training.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I see a lot too, and probably what people are doing now, or plan on doing from a conditioning standpoint, is having their kids just run, 2-3 miles, same pace, and that's their conditioning. In which we looked at what Tony Holler is saying is like, if you want to sprint, and Ken Clark, those types of things, like, all right, if you want to run fast, like you got to run fast. It's pretty simple. You need to sprint. And for me, from a soccer standpoint, you see again, it's like, oh, these people here is like, oh, you can't teach speed or something like that is what some coaches say. And it's like, this is what the sport of track is.
Well, I think,
it's taking people that are already probably better at being able to run fast, and then adding on to that. So I have a little bit more natural ability, but you can definitely work on it.
Well, so I think is also a very important piece, and this is something that I put in like a presentation on soccer, was like speed has like two very distinct categories. There's game like anticipation, which is speed, and then there's like actual physical speed. If I have the fastest guy on the field playing forward, and I have a super smart defender that is anticipating where that ball is going to be, no matter how fast the forward is, he's always going to beat him, right? Like you can't be reactive and catch up to somebody if the other person's already there. So I think like when someone says like you can't teach speed, I'd be like, well, which one are we talking about? Are we talking like skill acquisition and be able to understand the game, because that is speed in itself? Or are we talking physically, like this kid needs to get faster? And I think one of the things that we drastically miss as coaches, whether we're on the field or if we're in the weight room, is like my goal as the coach in the weight room is to give you the qualities that will give you the physical speed. Your goal on the field is to give you the skill qualities that then utilize that stuff so that they can anticipate and be better, but also maximize their output. And what I think is a big like issue is like we have coaches, like weight room coaches, doing sports specific stuff. Shouldn't be done, right? There's no reason for you to have a soccer ball inside the weight room as a training thing, because it never really mimics even close to what we're trying to do, right? Whereas, and then the same thing on the field, like quit doing conditioning. Your practice is conditioning. Like, cut that crap out. Like, leave it to somebody that actually knows how to do it. Because what we see is then what you were saying is like, all right, I'm just going to say go run for 3 miles, or we're going to do gassers until these kids are falling down on the ground. And it's like, well, what did that yield? Like nothing. So I think it's two different categories that get melded together, but never really truly understood. And if you can kind of figure out both of those, man, like, there's no reason that person wouldn't be unstoppable. When you think about training like maximal speed, what's your first thoughts on that?
Training maximal speed in the team setting?
Yeah.
So a couple points on kind of what you just said. I think the more majority of the times I've heard it, like we were watching a recruiting video in the office at Southern one day, and then the head coach was like, it was some winger or whatever, beats a player and just kind of flies by a couple people and just, pure speed. Oh, yeah, he's got something you can't teach, that speed. And I'm sitting there like, I can. But again, I mean, it's just one of those standout things. I mean, you can afford to have like a bad touch because you can probably catch up to it. Obviously, you want to work on the technical side of things, but you just have that speed to kind of get to the loose ball or whatever, break away from players to be able to get a shot off, all those different things.
Hey, would you say that's acceleration or is that maximal speed?
That would be acceleration, because typically it's going to be acceleration. But I think it was one of those Boyle videos. It kind of said that the big game plays are often made at top speed or something like that. In terms of like a break, you get a ball in your own half and you fly by and you run half the way to the field. That's probably maximal speed. I said like with football and stuff like that, breaking through.
And then getting out in the open field and taking off.
Yeah, and then you have 50, 60, 70 yards in front of you, and if you're not faster than the other guy that's chasing you, then, you can accelerate all you want, but if he's got a higher top speed, he's going to catch you probably.
Well, so that brings up a really good point, right? Is a lot of times we think that we are training maximal speed, but in reality, what does it happen? Maybe 2 times a game, if that. Yeah. What if you're not in that? What if you're not a position player that ever gets a chance to do that? Like I think of like a center back, right? Like very rare. Like what was the fastest?
Running max speed is probably not a good thing.
Well, like the fastest he runs is like up to get like in a corner kick, like or something like that.
Which is funny, because actually, in the Champions League last year, the European Soccer League with all the teams that play, like the best teams all play each other. The Liverpool center back recorded the highest top speed in the whole season last year, and I think they had a corner kick or something like that, and it got booted out, and he ran back. It was like Messi and somebody else, like 2v1 versus one of the other defenders, and he ran from the other 18 all the way back to the 18, and he had top speed. And he's like a really athletic guy, big, strong defender, and he just got really long strides too, but he's like powerful. And you see him, he's just like galloping down the field, and you're like there's some fast attacking players and stuff like that, and you're like, the center back recorded the top speed, like that's crazy.
Well, so that's
how many times does he have to do that?
Well, that's I think one of the big ideas that we have to get into our new like repertoire of training for this stuff is like, if you think you're getting it during practice, you're not. If you think you're getting it during the games, you're not. You may get a little bit, but it's not enough to cause a shift. And ultimately, like you said before, like if we want to train speed, we have to run really fast. And at the same time, if we run really fast, it comes at a cost. Like it's not like you can do that run and then do it again 2 seconds later. Like you have to do that. Usually, like I was looking at a lot of the rest recovery things, and Derek Hans had a good slide that said 10 seconds for every 10 yards, I think it was, or every 10 strides. And so basically,
recovery?
Yeah, was that what it was?
I thought it was like a minute.
Was it a minute? No, you're right. It was a minute.
It's a minute for.
It is a minute. I was like, that doesn't make sense because you wouldn't take just that time for 10 yards. It was a minute for every 10 seconds, right?
Okay.
Or 10 yards. No, it's a minute for every 10 yards. You're right. 10 yards. Yep. And when we look at that, he was saying that these people that are running 60s and 100s, they should be taking close to like a 5-minute break in between. And then there was
for them to be able to run that speed again.
All right, that is actually the best point, is that you want to be able to perform that maximal output again. And I think about when we do our Woodway sprints at the SPC, we're like, dude, you have to take a minimum of a minute rest break. And we're pretty close monitoring to see how quickly they are dropping off. It's like, what's the point of that one that typically, if they hit like 15 on there and then the next one's at 13.9, it's like, what the heck? Like, why? Like, it doesn't do anything for us anymore. Yeah. So did you see the slides where it's like, you have your high days, which are 95% and above, and then you have the moderate days, 76% to 94%, and then low days is 75% and below.
In terms of like sprint velocity?
Just that. So like, what's interesting to me is like, in our cases, we, for our conditioning, for the most part, we want to live in that 95% range or that 75% and below, because they're going to get the 76 to 94% range all through practice and games.
Yeah.
Do more of that is just like redundant and also just dumb, right? It doesn't give us that upper threshold that is going to bring it up higher. And then I was thinking about, well, for our lifting, we actually want to be in that 76 to 94% range all the time. We don't want to really ever go to maximal strength because we don't typically need it. And we don't want to be below the 76% because like it's just more of this like it's not enough to cause a strength adaptation in some cases that we're looking for. I was like, it's interesting how those things flip-flop, right? And that we want to stay the hell out of the mid-range for our conditioning, and we want to stay in there for our strength training.
Yeah. Yeah, so from like a team sport training that, I mean, what I've done is at the end of the warm-ups is just do a couple of 10-yard flies, 20-yard flies, literally do like, I always tell them, you guys need to walk back, and they just want to jog back and then do it right again. I mean, that's a way to do it.
Well, so hey, why do you this is a big part of this stuff, I think, where Tony Holler made it very clear. How do you get people or kids or athletes to take more time is I think you have to give them feedback, which would be recording. And that's why I think the Woodway gives us like more kids are more likely to take time off if they saw a little bit of a dip in their speed, because they know they're now like, oh shit, like that went down. Like I need to kind of like do something different on this next one. Where if you just say, all right, sprint out, and then they kind of jog back and they're ready to go again, unless they see a drop in that next sprint time or velocity that they can actually quantify, like why would they think anything different? Just get it over with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like I got 2 or 3 of them that go all at once, kind of that waterfall effect.
Yeah.
And I can't time them all. But like what I just thought of was like, all right, do I give them, instead of having them drop back, maybe they get down there and then, hey, grab your ball, juggle, 3 minutes, maybe we do that again.
I think that's actually a really good idea. Because that was
or something, one of the other, build it into the other warm up that we're doing. And I was doing a Fergus Connolly. He had like a course thing in terms of like performance training in the team setting. And it was something like that. They were talking about doing their change of direction blocks or their speed blocks, whatever they were working on from a physical standpoint, and how they kind of throw that in and mix it in with the drills that they're doing, especially early on. Because he broke it up and it looked kind of like a bar graph, and it was just kind of taking up the amount of time. And then it was just like little blips of, a couple minutes of, maybe speed work, change direction work, whatever. And then it was back into the drill, which is a good idea. But it kind of go, if coaches, hear that, they're like, well, they need to be focused on the drill that they're doing, because that's kind of what the U.S., the federation will teach you as from a coaching standpoint is, you have your 4 blocks of, your warm up, the next progression of whatever you're doing, and the third thing, and you go from like whatever your warm up to smaller numbers like 3v3, like more numbers, maybe it's 5v5, and then by the end you want to be able to be going full side or 7v7 if you've only got 14 players. So some coaches are like, whatever, but you can't say, oh, you can't teach speed and then refuse to actually try to implement things to develop your players' athletic qualities. Because I think the other thing, any player model, if you look at any sport, it's physical, psychological, technical, and probably all that sport coaches ever do is technical and tactical. They think they're doing physical, but they're not doing a very good job. And who are we to do the psychological part? They'll do a little bit in terms of trying to develop a mindset for hard work, stuff like that, or, team values and whatnot. But, it's not like they're a psychologist.
No, but you know what? That like if you said to me after listening to what you just said, what would I then structure, make my practice like to make my practices better? If I had no opportunity to get kids in a weight room or do stuff, like how would I do this? Um, it actually, if you were to boil it down, I'd be like, all right, cool. You got to have like a decent warm up, right? And that could look like however you want. Just do something, and then you got to address this kind of speed component at some point. And if it's only 3, that's cool. Just do 3 maximal sprints. If that's all you want to do, and you can do some juggling in between, or some add in another little bit of warm up component to it, awesome. But that's like that, and then you would move into your tactical and technical side of stuff. But the other thing too, the psychology part is just like, yeah, you should probably be giving positive reinforcement always. Right? And like that's hard in some cases because maybe your team is a little bit unruly or there's a group of kids that just hasn't like played together or something. But ultimately, if you want to kind of check off those 4 boxes, it's like, all right, maximal speed. I don't need them doing 50 push-ups, right? Like no military style training ever really yielded anything fantastic, right? In athletics. So I'm not really worried about that part. Maximal speed, probably the biggest factor that's gonna like bring everything else up with it. You checked off the physical component, just do it smart. So, if it's only 3 sprints of practice, make sure they're maximal, make sure you have enough recovery time. Positive or psychological, try to use positive reinforcement more than anything else. Technical and tactical, you have a better understanding of that than I do. Do whatever you want to do. Start with small-sided games and then work up to bigger numbers and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be hard, is I guess the message.
Yeah, and again, so like from a sports coach perspective, that's what we're there to do, the technical and tactical side of things. And, we've got to develop the all-around player, but we're not exactly best equipped to do the psychological or the physical side. And, that's where, a higher program, you have your conditioning, your fitness coaches or your strength coach, whoever you've got with you. And then from me, more so as a athletic development and just overall speed and agility type of stuff, coach, director, whatever some clubs might have. Some clubs don't have it, and then it just comes down to the coach of conditioning. So it's like, all right, you need to probably reach out to a professional to help you as a coach or, as a club to kind of be better in that area. Because it'd be the same thing as you, the coach, right now, being like, oh, let's say you can't coach your players. Like, what are you going to do? Send them to a gym teacher to teach them soccer skills? Like, you don't know what you're going to get out of that. Mm-hmm. On the opposite side, it's like, you're a coach, and I'm not going to send – like, if you didn't play soccer and you were just strength and conditioning coach, they wouldn't send their player to you to develop them as a soccer player. Correct. So it's like, why are we – now we're relying on soccer coaches or, whatever, basketball coach, whatever you're playing, to develop your player from a
physicality standpoint,
athlete. Yeah. And if you don't know how to do that, if your background's not in that, then you're wasting your own time. You might as well just probably focus more so on the physical, on the technical and tactical side of things in training, because a lot of coaches already think they're limited with time. And then you look at, if I was a coach, how do I implement these things? Or I don't have time for that. It's like, you got time to go make your players run for 10 minutes straight. You can spend half the time and get better benefit out of it, or just get a better understanding of literally it's like, from a conditioning standpoint or whatever, it's like, what should I have my kids do for conditioning in terms of intervals or whatever? Because that's, for soccer, lacrosse, those types of sports, that's what it's going to be. It's like, watch one player, watch the position they play in a game, time them, and see, how many seconds they're running, and then time their rest before they have to run again. And literally, maybe if I'm outside mid, I went for 10 seconds, whatever, now nothing's happening, I'm resting for 20 seconds, and then I'm running again for 10 seconds or whatever the interval is. That's how you condition for that
position.
You know what I mean? But it's just like, it's simple, but it's not necessarily common sense, I guess.
Well, I think the other thing, though, you have to keep in mind in that scenario is like, we think all of a sudden that because we're doing these interval training that it mimics the game, or like, I think of like, well, how would you train if your test? well, first, if you don't have a test to begin with to get a baseline of your physical capacity, like you've already missed the boat, right? Because then you're just chasing your tail. You have no idea whether or not what you're doing is working to some degree, unless whatever you see on the field is definitely going to be subjective. And there's too many other variables that you can throw in there to say, oh, it's because we did this conditioning program. Like that makes me think of like, oh, we did this awesome conditioning program, and then we played the first 3 games were like the worst teams in the league, right? And we crushed them. Worked. Like, well, you don't know that. So, but what makes me think of is like, all right, if I'm training for like the beep test as my conditioning test, right? Do I then just do these intervals? And is the beep test like the best predictor of game fitness? I would say no, it's just a general idea of like a level of fitness in general, right? Because the game is so drastically reactionary and different all the time. You don't have a perfect way to prepare for it. What you probably need is, man, we probably want this high-end top maximal speed. And then we want this ability to like a pretty decent aerobic system to buffer the recovery from that type of output. What does that look like? Maybe then I'll throw in a day of like those intervals, and then the other day is a low day, right? But it shouldn't always just be this like 10, 20 interval crap. Like, to like put this person in like puke zone after like 5 minutes. It's just like the idea that more work is always better, we know is not right. But then also having the parameters to work within, so you know when to push hard and how to push hard, is also crucial, because if you don't ever put enough stimulus on it, they don't ever really change. And like the last thing I'll say about that is like, if you're using conditioning as punishment, or if you have kids that aren't buying into it, they're never going to put the effort in to do it, right? I mean, like we've seen that in the facility where it's like, dude, why can't you like just run a little bit faster during your shuttle runs? Or why can't you push the sled a little bit harder? And they just kind of die. And that's mainly on us, because we haven't found a way for this kid to like really buy into like why he's doing this. And in some cases, like they'll never will.
Race is a good idea. So like with a lot of the fast feet stuff that we do in there, the fast feet transitions, I always pair them up with a partner.
Yeah.
Or I have 3 or 4 lines, and they got to go 10 yards. I'm like, don't be last in your group. And then I don't want to lose.
It adds a little bit of fun and also
force the hand for them to actually put some effort into it. Because other than that, you could just see them kind of dogging it from a one-on-one perspective. Same thing with like shuttle runs and stuff. Make it a race, or find a way for them to be competing against themselves. But then it goes back into what you said, like, all right, why am I doing this? And if you can explain that and they understand it, then you're good, which probably happens in most cases. But some kids are probably just like, this isn't important.
Yeah.
But if for that kid that's like, oh, this isn't important, then that's probably a case for, all right, let's race. You know what I mean? And then they're like, all right, I don't want to appear to be the loser here.
Well, I think the other thing too is you could set a standard, and I think we, with our Woodway stuff, where I'm like, listen, our fastest one is 17.41 for our females. Where are you compared to that? Or, I need you to be at least above 15.5, right? Because that gives me like, I know you get the minimum standard of like where I need you to be. Once you get there, awesome, right? Then we can figure this out. But I need you to work towards that first. And that, I think, gives them also then the opportunity to be like, all right, where do I have to go? There's an end result or an end kind of goal in mind, which also gives a little bit more motivation. It has to be like, you just got to get faster. Like, well, how fast do I have to get? Like that makes a big difference too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think from a sports coach perspective, what works well is programming in some kind of top speed, max velocity, max sprinting work right at the end of the warm up before you kind of move into the other stuff. Or like we said, can you involve that into whatever your first drill is? If you're doing passing triangles or whatever, a bunch of different combinations where there's no pressure, so it's relatively low intensity, then maybe when you stop to make your coaching point or in between progressions, all right, you got your setup thing, people hit one sprint, they get back, all right, here's the next thing, 4 or 5 minutes later, next, boom, and you just knocked out a couple max speed sprints within your drill that takes 10-15 minutes, because like that's the typical period of, maybe that's what you do for your pass patterns or something. I don't know.
How many?
If you're smart enough as a coach to be able to make it easily transitionable, like there's no one size fits all approach. Like I don't know what you have to at your disposal for space and field time and stuff like that. So you just got to be clever and find out, like, this is important, and you need to understand that this is important for your players, and that you need to value putting time and effort into developing this. So I
So
would say the warm up or find these other ways, because also um, it's going to prepare your players for what they're about to be exposed to as your practice gets more intense, and they're actually racing against other players to get to the ball or whatever. But also a game, like the game's the best conditioning tool, and that's when the kids are running the fastest and the most or whatever. So it's like, if you need to do that before a game too. Maybe not as much as you would in practice, but a couple sprints to make sure that my engine's up to where it needs to be for me to be prepared to play.
that's a really good point. Like doing at least one maximal sprint before you even start the game, so you're not going out there without that tissue having that elastic component already kind of revved up. So let's finish on this. What would your rep scheme and distances look like?
Probably anywhere between 10 to like 30 yards. And again, I think it's about finding that minimal effective dose,
Good
3
point.
sprints, because you've got another 90-minute practice where these kids are at some point, usually they're gonna be at a relatively high intensity, and you just got to dial back. Maybe, I'm not gonna have my kids do the most physically exhausting drill for an ungodly amount of time. Like, again, I don't want to overtax them during, like, you've got to kind of build up the stress, but it's not like they're going to be standing around for the next 90 minutes and you need to be like, all right, yeah, we need 7, 8, 9, 10 sprints. It's like, we can get that in the drill that we're doing. And something that I've learned for another coach is, like, he does a lot of transitional work. So, your typical, you attack, you defend, and then maybe you get off or whatever, or you just attack. Like, you do a shooting drill and you attack. Well, how can you make that transitional? So if we lose the ball, like, now I'm working back, and we won the ball back again, and it's like winner stays on type of thing. Like, the ball keeps transitioning, and that's what the game is. So you program stuff like that. That's a really good conditioner, but it also works on those other qualities of speed and agility and stuff, because it's constantly they're reacting to something happening. It's not like, oh, I shot, I scored, or I missed. The goalie has it, drills over, next group up. It's like, oh, I need to do something.
Back.
I think 2 or 3 is probably fine.
I think to what you just said was a good point. Like Derek Hansen had a thing where he's like, you can use this in field sports stuff too, in that, like, you do an agility drill or you're doing a dribbling drill, and they just have them sprint after they finish, like, going through it, and sprint for like 20, 30 yards, right? And that could be some of that training as well. It doesn't always have to be this just like straight linear stuff from a dead stop and then go. And I think the other piece of that is, like, you said like 10 to 30, maybe 40 yards at most. Like, the idea of sprinting a full field to me is like just ludicrous, right? Like, it makes no sense.
I forget who I heard talking about it recently, but they're like, it's funny when you have a team do, or a bunch of people do something like that. It's pretty close the first 50, 60 yards or whatever for the most part. Then you get around like 70 to 100, and people realize, I'm not going to win this thing, and then the gap just gets bigger and bigger. So, and you always think, like, it's just because the other person was faster. But, like, all right, if the other person's 10 yards in front of me and we got 30 yards to go, and they're
Take off the gas.
Mentally, maybe subconsciously, I'm like, I'm not winning, and then you don't even have that desire. Whereas maybe the front 2 people are running neck and neck the whole time, and they're the only ones that are still close. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. It was just an interesting point that it made me think of that. But yeah, you don't need that much. Again, you find the minimal effective dose to get the adaptation that you're going for, and find a way that's easily effective and efficient in terms of the implementation into your training sessions. And then just as a player, something we didn't really talk about, that we kind of were going to, is just as a player, like, now that I've had my surgery and stuff like that, and just looking back on things, like, I can't go and run right now, can't go and sprint, and, like, got a perfectly good yard over there where I could have, I've done stuff in the past in terms of, like, conditioning over there, but, like, it's literally like 40 yards probably of just flat going, and I'm like, I wish I trained that more.
Utilized it.
On that. So if I'm a player right now, and the stuff I've been programming in for the club sporting, is some flying tens. I'd be getting some kind of sprint work in as a player to work. I mean, it's uncomfortable is what it is because you're running, you're really challenging yourself. But if you give yourself enough rest, like it's probably fine. It's only 10 seconds of hard work, and you just catch it. Like it takes a couple minutes to regain your heart rate and get that stuff to go back down and then go again. But you got to work on these things to be prepared when you get back. So like if I was playing right now, I mean, it depends on the person too. If I told myself, when I was 16, 15 to do this stuff right now, I'd probably be like, yeah, whatever. But now knowing I would do that if I was if I was training for college or whatever right now, if I had an extra year, that's stuff that I'd be looking to do as opposed to just sit around at home all day. And even if this wasn't happening and your coach isn't doing it or whatever, you've got to find a way to work on these things. Sprinting.
Well, I think what you just made a really good point of is that this is why I love our soccer kids to go do track in the spring.
Yeah.
Right. Because it teaches them how to do this stuff on their own. And if you said the same thing, if you said to me in high school and college, like, Tommy, you have to just do 3 to 5 maximal sprints with like a 3-minute break in between that are like 20 to 50 yards. And then go do whatever other little conditioning stuff you want to do. Probably actually go play. I'd be like, oh, that's it? And I get this rest time? I think I can manage that. But if you just said to me, like, hey, you got to go, like, kick the crap out of yourself all the time, that's when I was like, I'd rather just go play. Like, I don't want to condition. It's dumb. Like, I'm not doing anything. So
yeah, if I wanted to do that, I'd be on the cross-country team, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't like to run. Soccer's a lot of running, but I'm chasing things.
Oh, good.
I'm not chasing anything on the road.
Nice. And I think the last thing is flying tens or just flying into a sprint is super smart. So like for people that don't know, that means like kind of starting at like a jog, ramping up, and then sprinting as opposed to trying to just full maximal acceleration out. I mean, we do that on our woodways and we've never had anybody like get hurt doing that. Like as opposed to like starting out of the blocks and from a dead stop and sprinting out, hamstrings are sometimes not ready for that as much. And I think the flying,
unless you're in track, you're rarely ever in any sport standing and then going. Like you might have to change direction, which is a different topic, but maybe I'm jogging down the field and then something happens and boom, I got to explode into that space. So you're already up at a pace.
You're already moving.
Like what I do, the easiest way to teach it is, work, as you get closer to this cone, it's 60, 70, 80. By the time you hit that cone, you need to be 100% to the next thing. And it's just an easy, whatever their 60, 70% is. And then by that time it's, hit the switch kind of thing. And it works pretty well.
Nice, man. That's a good conversation.
Yep. They always are,
Hopefully somebody will take something from it and utilize it. All right. I'll talk to you next week.
Okie doke.